Hey guys, tonight we journey into a world you think you know, but trust me, you don't. Castles. You imagine towering walls, roaring fires, armored guards, and sure, that's all true. But tonight, we're slipping into the less glamorous parts of history. The parts no bard ever sang about. The parts too real for fairy tales and too necessary to ignore. Because if there's one thing everyone in history, king, queen, knight, servant, monk, all had to do no matter how noble or holy or hungry, it's go to the bathroom. And in the dead of winter, in a freezing medieval castle made entirely of stone without insulation, without plumbing, and often without warning. That was an ordeal. So before we drop into this particular pit of the past, take a moment to like and subscribe if you enjoy sinking slowly into the darker, itchier corners of history. And tell me in the comments, what time is it where you're listening? I like to imagine this story unfolding across hundreds of cold bedrooms around the world, maybe one a little warmer than the ones we'll talk about tonight. Now dim your lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft, white noise hum. And let's slip together into tonight's story. Tonight's journey, how did people use toilets in medieval castles during freezing winters? This isn't about luxury. It's not even about comfort. It's about need. It's about waking up at 3 in the morning in a dark, damp room with a belly full of questionable stew and no idea where your fur slippers have gone. It's about frozen stone floors, flickering torches, chamber pots that slosh if you move too fast, and something called a garderobe, which, trust me, you're going to get very familiar with. Because the truth is, medieval castles were built for defense, not digestion. They were designed to repel invaders, not to make bathroom breaks convenient. And so tonight, you're going to feel what it was like not just to use the toilet, but to fear it. You'll wake in the cold. You'll cross that echoing chamber. You'll pass the guards, the hounds, the icy drafts from the arrow slits. And finally, you'll sit. Not on a toilet seat, but on a cold, splintered plank of wood above a shaft that disappears into darkness and possibly the moat. You'll wonder, who went here before me? How many times has this been cleaned? Is this smell normal? And you'll find out this was normal. This was royalty. This was medieval sanitation at its finest and its most horrifying. So wrap yourself in something warm. Try not to think about how lucky you are. And get ready to experience the one part of castle life that no one, absolutely no one, could avoid. We're going deep. We're going cold. We're going medieval. You wake up slowly. Not because you're well-rested, know that luxury doesn't exist here. You wake because your body forces you to. A deep, unmistakable ache in your belly. That quiet, queasy urgency that says something needs to be dealt with. Your eyes blink open into darkness. Not modern darkness, not the kind where light leaks in from electronics or street lamps. This darkness is complete. Heavy. Old. The kind of dark that feels like it's pressing on your face. You shift beneath the blankets, or rather the layers of woven wool and fur stitched into something that smells faintly of wet sheep and old dust. The bed creaks. Straw crunches beneath you, and immediately you regret moving. The cold is instant and cruel. It claws through the seams of your linen nightshirt across your back down to your toes. It lives in this room like a second inhabitant. And you remember where you are, a medieval castle, in the dead of winter. There is no central heating, no thermostat to reach for, no plug-in heater humming softly by your bedside. There is only you and the stone and the cold, and the problem in your stomach is not going away. You groan quietly. You pull the wool closer, trying to delay the inevitable. You know what's coming. Because in this world, this time going to the toilet is not simple. There is no bathroom door to walk through, no flush, no tap, no soap, no mirror. Only a very old routine, one you're now forced to follow. You sit up, slowly, carefully. Your bones feel heavier than usual. Your muscles tense against the cold. You pull your nightcap down tighter over your ears. It barely helps. You swing your feet down to the floor and immediately regret it. Stone, icy, hard. It sucks the warmth right out of your skin. You yelp quietly, the sound swallowed by the thick silence of the room. You reach for your slippers, soft leather things lined with scraps of fur. One of them is missing. You find it under the bed, stiff with cold, chewed slightly at the toe. The hound must have dragged it there. You don't have time to question it. You shuffle to your feet, teeth already beginning to chatter. You squint toward the hearth. The fire you remember lighting last night is now a pile of half-dead embers. A faint red glow, just enough to cast the room in deep, haunted shadows. Smoke clings to the air. So does something else. A scent. Earthy. Sharp. Sour. You know it too well now. The chamber pot. Yes. That's your first option. It's beside the bed, tucked under a small wooden bench resting on a chipped tile to keep it from freezing solid to the floor. A wide, shallow ceramic bowl with a curved rim and a handle that was once brass but is now rusted to a dull gray. You stare at it. You hate it. But the alternative is worse. You pull the chamber pot out slowly. It sloshes. You try not to breathe through your nose because it's already occupied, used by someone last night. Maybe you, maybe not. Either way, it hasn't been emptied. The contents are cold, congealed, unforgiving. This is royalty. This is your life. You crouch carefully, knees stiff, robe bunched around your thighs, trying to balance on the edge without tipping it. Your hands press into the rough stone wall for support. It's not graceful. It's not clean. It's not private. You finish. Slowly, praying you don't miss. You do, a little. You shiver as you stand back up, muscles tensing from the cold. There is no toilet paper. There is a rough scrap of linen cloth hanging from a hook, reused, daily rinsed when remembered. You don't want to touch it. But you do, then the pot is pushed back under the bench. Forgotten until morning. Until some poor servant, likely named Thomas or Agnes, has to carry it down 3 floors and dump it into the designated cesspit or out the waste chute. And maybe, just maybe, they'll rinse it. But you're not done. Because the chamber pot only works sometimes, for certain functions. But tonight, you feel it. The other need. The one that requires a trip. You groan again, this time out loud, because you now have to walk, not to a bathroom, but to the garderobe. A word that sounds almost elegant, like a chamber for dressing or grooming. But it's not. It's the castle toilet. And in winter, it's the worst room in the world. You wrap your cloak tightly around you, wool lined with fur, the smell of smoke embedded in every seam. You grab a candle stub. The flame gutters in the icy air. You open your chamber door. The hallway beyond is darker than your room. You step into it, and it swallows you. Your slippers scuff against the stone floor. The air is colder here, sharper. Your breath fogs in front of you like ghost smoke. You pass a guard. He nods without speaking. His eyes are dull. his face wrapped in cloth. His hands tremble slightly. He knows where you're going. You shuffle down the corridor, past shuttered windows, past a suit of armor that creaks slightly when the wind shifts, past a tapestry that flutters when it shouldn't. Then you see it. The wooden door at the end of the hall, iron hinges, slightly warped, covered in frost. You open it and the cold rushes out like an angry spirit. You're in the guardrobe, and suddenly you wish you'd just used the pot. You survived the night. You used the chamber pot. You braved the garderobe. You've made it back to bed. And now, morning. But there is no soft alarm, no sun-warmed bedroom, no birdsong. There is only cold. The kind that wraps around your ribs and sinks its fingers into your spine. The kind that reminds you you're still in a medieval castle. And no, nothing has improved since last night. The fire is gone. Just ash and a blackened log. The room smells of damp wool, old smoke, and human presence, that stale skin, sweat, soot scent that clings to unwashed bodies in unventilated spaces. You pull yourself up, slowly. Everything aches. Your stomach growls. Your breath fogs. And, well, you smell. Because in this world, hygiene isn't daily. It's not even weekly. It's practical, seasonal, and occasionally optional. But still, you do what's expected. A servant enters with a bowl of lukewarm water. Not hot. Never hot. They had to haul it from the kitchen hearth 3 floors down, and by the time it reached you, the steam had died in the stairwell. They set the bowl on a small wooden table beside your bed. It sloshes slightly. You can already see specks floating in it, lint, maybe ash, maybe something worse. You nod in thanks. They bow and leave. And now the ritual begins. You dip the linen cloth, rough, half-starched, reused, into the water. You dab, not scrub, behind the ears, under the arms, face, neck, hands. That's it. No more. The water is too cold for comfort. Your fingers ache just from holding the cloth, and the smell doesn't really go away. It just gets layered like dust on perfume. Soap, if you're lucky, and rich. A tiny sliver of something made from tallow and ash, scented with herbs, rosemary, or lavender if you're a queen. If you're a servant, probably just plain lye. And it burns if it gets in your eyes. You use it sparingly. Not because it's rare, but because too much washing is believed to make you vulnerable. Pores open to the cold. Cold leads to illness. Illness leads to death. So you clean what you must. But you don't bathe. Not fully. Not often. That's for special occasions. Or for when the lice become too bold. You reach for your tooth-cleaning stick, a chewed birch twig with a frayed end. It's supposed to help. You rub it across your teeth, then rinse your mouth with vinegar wine, or salted water, or if you're lucky, mint steeped in warm ale. Your gums sting. But it's better than nothing. You smell of herbs, smoke, and yesterday. That's enough. Then comes your hair, long, tangled, full of secrets, brushed by a maid using stiff bristles. You wince, flinch, mutter. No shampoo, no conditioner. Just oil, maybe rose water, maybe a dusting of crushed rosemary or powdered herbs. Sometimes a bit of flour is worked into the scalp to soak up grease. It cakes, it itches, it helps. Lice combs are kept nearby, iron fine-toothed merciless. You use it discreetly. Nobility isn't immune. You tie your hair back, tight, out of the way. Then a linen coif or cap to trap it in place. And just like that, you're clean enough. You're ready for breakfast. You descend to the small chamber where it's waiting. But here's the catch: you've already touched food. In the garderobe, in the chamber pot. And there is no soap at the sink. Because there is no sink. You wipe your hands on the same linen cloth. You rinse in the same bowl. You hope that's good enough. Then you sit. A trencher yesterday's stale bread holds a slab of cold pottage, some dried meat, and a rind of cheese so old it could legally rule a village. You eat slowly. You don't taste much. The pottage is lukewarm. Mushy grains, onions, maybe a stray bit of turnip. If you're lucky, a few threads of salted meat. The bread is dry. The cheese is hard. And the mead sharp, strong, safer than water. The servants don't speak. The dogs lurk under the table begging for crumbs. Your stomach churns quietly, and all the while your mind returns to the toilet. The cold of the stone, the sting of your skin, the smell, the silence, the fact that someone else will soon carry your waste in their hands and throw it into the cold, slow-moving moat where it will freeze into a brown island waiting for spring. You wonder briefly if royalty is worth it, and then you take another bite, because you're hungry, and because there's no other option. This is hygiene. This is food. This is mourning in a medieval castle, where clean is a suggestion, where warm is rare, and where going to the bathroom is just the first trial of the day. Let's begin with your clothes, not the glamorous ones from the paintings, not velvet gowns or suits of armor polished for parade. We're talking about what you wear every day, especially when you're half asleep and freezing, stumbling down the corridor in search of relief. Your base layer is linen, always linen. It's scratchy, rough, stiff from too few washes and smells faintly like damp cupboard. You wear a long shirt or shift beneath everything else, not for fashion, but for survival. It's the only layer that touches your skin. And by this point in winter, it's more of a second skin than a garment. Over that comes wool. Wool tunic, wool hose, wool underhose, wool outerwear, wool cloak. It insulates a little. Mostly it traps body heat, sweat, and the occasional flea. Then come the fastenings, drawstrings, girdles, buttons, laces, layers upon layers, stitched and tied, sometimes pinned. Getting into your clothes takes 10 minutes. Getting out of them at 3 in the morning with an urgent stomach and stiff fingers. A nightmare. There is no zipper, no elastic waistband, no helpful flap. If you're a woman, it's worse. Your kirtle, that long underdress, is floor length, heavy, dragging. If you're layered properly, you have at least 3 petticoats beneath it. To go to the garderobe, you either lift all of it above your waist, praying not to drop it, or risk sitting on your own skirt. If it falls, it lands in the chute, and you're not getting it back. Men fare slightly better. Their tunics are shorter. Hose can be dropped. But everything's tight. And in winter, everything is cold. Flesh sticks to wood. Linen clings like wet parchment. Buttons are stiff. Ties freeze. Sometimes a servant has to help. That's not luxury. That's survival. And then there's your shoes. Soft leather, thin soles, no insulation. You can feel the cold through them as soon as you step from your chamber. By the time you reach the garderobe, your toes are stiff. You don't sit on a toilet. You squat on a slab of stone or a wooden seat built over a chute. There's no warmth, no cushioning, no mercy. In some castles, the garderobe is built right into the outer wall for gravity's sake. Waste drops directly down into a cesspit, or more often into the moat. You've been warned not to look down, but you do. It's black. It's deep. It smells eternal. And in winter it steams. You wonder for a terrifying second what happens if you slip. The stone beneath your feet is slick. The seat wobbles. The walls are cold. You grip the side rough-hewn stone damp with condensation, and you don't move until it's over. Now, imagine this moment in a castle designed for war, not comfort. Because shelter in the medieval world is stone. That's it. Thick, uneven, weathered blocks that absorb cold and never give it back. Your walls are damp. Your ceiling drips in places. Your window, a narrow slit, lets in more wind than light. There are tapestries, yes, hung to cover the chill, but they're more decorative than defensive. The wind still whispers through the seams. The rats still scratch behind them. And the guardrobe. It's the worst room in the castle, built on the outside wall far from the fire, with no window glass, just an opening to the abyss. The wind races in, stinging your cheeks, freezing your breath. The smell is sharp, not rotting, just ripe, like something ancient and angry. Some garderobes are shared, some are private. None are pleasant. In some castles, there's more than one chute. You can hear someone else above you or below you. And yes, things fall. You learn very quickly not to linger. But sometimes, you have no choice. Your stomach twists. Your fingers are too cold to untie the belt fast enough. Your knees shake. You're sweating from the effort of not slipping, even while your teeth chatter. And when you're done, there is no toilet paper, no warm bidet, just a rag, hung on a hook, stiff, damp, reused, or maybe a sponge, kept in a bowl of water, if you're rich, or leaves, or moss, or snow, whatever's available. You wipe, quickly, carefully. You stand. You tie everything back slowly, fumbling with frozen fingers. And then you run, back to the fire, back to your room, back to your miserable bed where your linen sheets feel warm simply because they are not stone. And you lie there wide-eyed, wondering how many more times you'll have to do this before spring. Because shelter doesn't mean safety, and clothes don't mean comfort. And in a medieval castle, even your own bathroom feels like an enemy. There are no plumbing systems in this world, no flush handles, no water pressure, no septic tanks humming quietly out of sight. There is only gravity and servants. The ones who walk through freezing corridors at dawn with a sloshing pot in each hand. The ones who carry waste down stone stairs slick with ice and the echoes of last night's groans. The ones who open the small wooden hatch near the outer wall and pour your sins into the pit below. They are the reason your castle doesn't smell even worse than it already does. They are the gong farmers. Yes, that's the name. Gong from an old word for going. Farmer not because they harvest anything useful, but because they handle what everyone else leaves behind. It is without question the worst job in the castle. Even among servants they are whispered about. They deal with the filth. Literally. Not just chamber pots, but the cesspits. Deep sunken vaults where all the waste from the garderobes collects over days, weeks, sometimes years. There is no schedule. You clean it when it overflows. And in winter, that means breaking through ice just to begin the job. The gong farmer wakes before the sun. He wraps his boots in rags not for warmth, but because they'll be ruined by day's end. His sleeves are tied up. His nose is already running. He carries a long-handled wooden scoop, flat at one end, rounded at the other, and a pair of buckets that have never in all their long, miserable life held water. He begins with the chamber pots. There are dozens. Each bedroom has one, each hallway a few more. The kitchen keeps its own. The servants' quarters are lined with them. He empties them all, down a chute, or into a barrel, or out into the moat. Yes, the moat. Because when you picture a castle moat, you imagine water. Clean, cold, maybe teeming with swans, but in reality, it was often a sewage system. Waste channeled from guard-robes and privies emptied directly into the moat, turning it into a black, slow-moving sludge of rot and runoff. In winter, it freezes over mostly, but underneath that crust of white, the moat still moves, and the smell, it lingers. It clings to the walls, to your clothes, to your lungs. Even if you're a queen, you've smelled it. Even if you're a visiting duke, your horse refused to drink from it. The gong farmer empties his loads there. But sometimes the castle has a pit, an enclosed cesspool dug deep with wooden planks laid across for access. It is slippery. It is full. It is dangerous. You can fall in. People have. If you do, you don't come out. The weight, the stench, the cold. Your own body turns against you, refuses to breathe. So the gong farmer walks carefully, each step deliberate, each scoop cautious. He never hurries. The pit is emptied with buckets, then carts, then if it hasn't frozen solid, raked. The waste is buried in a field far from the castle walls, or burned, or in wealthier castles carted off and sold to farmers as fertilizer. Yes, sold. Even your filth has value, and this is only one of many survival jobs. The laundress, for example. She handles the linen rags used in place of toilet paper, washes them, by hand, in cold water, with lye soap that burns the skin. She doesn't flinch, not anymore. The kitchen boys scrub the trencher's edible bread plates that have soaked up food and fingers, and whatever lingered from the latrine visit before dinner. The maids clean the guard-robe room, scraping the wooden seat with knives, burning herbs to clear the air, muttering under their breath as they go. They hang sprigs of rosemary, mint, and juniper in the corners. Not because it cleans the air, but because it masks it. Because everyone pretends that nobles don't smell, that kings don't sweat, that queens don't sit shivering over the same seat a servant used at dawn. But you all do. And someone has to clean up afterward. Even the castle architect has a role. They design the chute at an angle to help the waste slide outward. They position the guard-robe above a running stream. If possible, water helps carry the worst away. But in winter, the water freezes. The flow stops. The system breaks down. You don't speak of it. You just walk faster past the hallway where the air is thick. And yet through all this, the castle lives. It stinks. It leaks. It crumbles at the edges. But it endures. Because people endure. The servants' shoulders aching drag the buckets. The torch boys light fires along the halls to keep the waste from freezing solid inside the chute. The kitchen scullions toss ashes over the cesspit to keep the flies down. Everyone plays a role. Everyone labors. Even you. You make decisions. You assign punishments. You balance survival against pride. But you are not above this world. Not above the cold. Not above the rot. Not above the simple, brutal fact that everyone must relieve themselves. And when they do, someone else has to carry the weight. You don't think of it during the day. Not when the sun is up. Not when the halls are noisy. Not when the fire's crackling and the scent of roasting meat fills the air. But once night falls, once the corridor grows quiet, once the only sound is the wind moaning between arrow slits, you start to wonder, what if something else lives in the guardrobe? Because in the medieval world, waste isn't just waste, it's unclean. Yes, but it's also spiritually dangerous. Let's start with sin. According to the teachings of the church, the body was a flawed vessel. It desired, it sweated, it bled. And yes, it relieved itself. Every bodily function was a reminder of the fall of man, of the sin in your blood, of the weakness passed down from Adam. To go to the toilet was not shameful, but it was humbling, and for some frightening. You were most vulnerable when exposed, when squatting, when alone in the guardrobe with your garments bunched around your thighs and your head bowed. You weren't praying, but you might as well have been, because anything could find you there. Demons, they said, liked latrines, not just metaphorically, literally. The waste pits were dark, damp, putrid. Perfect breeding grounds for disease and, by the logic of the time, for evil spirits. Some chroniclers even wrote about demons rising from the pit, hiding in the chute, whispering up through the cracks in the stone. If you died suddenly on the toilet, and it happened more than once, people whispered that the devil had taken you, that he'd dragged you down, pulled you by the ankles, swallowed you whole. You may laugh now, but imagine it. A cold night, no torch, your breath visible, the seat damp with someone else's presence, and beneath you a black hole, bottomless and hissing with the echo of wind and water and decay. You wouldn't laugh then. So people protected themselves. They crossed themselves before entering the guardrobe. They said prayers before squatting. They kept charms on their person, bits of bone herbs or copper tokens blessed by a priest. And when they could, they held it in, because superstition ran deep, and faith was stitched into the very stones of the castle. Guardrobes were built with drainage channels, yes, but also with trapdoors and gratings, not just for function, but for fear. No one wanted something crawling up from the pit. It's said that monks would chant psalms while emptying waste, that even the lowest servant would murmur a prayer to Saint Elmo or to Michael the Archangel asking for protection in unclean places, because the medieval world believed in spiritual geography. Some places were holy, some were cursed. The garderobe was a border, a threshold, not quite part of the castle, not quite part of the earth. A liminal space where rules faded and so did protection. There were tales whispered among servants of people seeing eyes in the chute, or hands reaching up through the filth, of ghostly voices repeating names spoken in secret. One tale passed from guard to guard told of a man who used the toilet at midnight during the new moon and never came back. They found his cloak on the floor, his torch still burning. But no man, no sound. Just silence and a strange smell that never left the stone. The church took it seriously, too. Clergy debated whether it was sinful to feel relief when relieving yourself. Too much pleasure in the body, even in release, was suspect. A few monks went so far as to whip themselves after using the privy to remind their flesh of its impurity. Extreme, maybe, but this was a world where plague could come from a bad wind, where leprosy was seen as a punishment from God, where every bodily fluid had meaning. So naturally, what left the body, especially what was buried or flushed away, was treated with a strange mix of disgust, caution, and fear. And it wasn't just demons. People feared curses placed in the guardrobe. Yes, toilet magic. A woman wronged might place a charm in the waist chute of her enemy, a knot of hair, a carved figure. a bit of wax pierced with pins, and from that moment on, diarrhea. Fever, madness, infertility. No one could prove it, but no one wanted to risk it. So before entering the garderobe, many would carry a blessed object, a rosary, a relic, a small wooden cross, not out of reverence, but out of fear. The medieval world was full of boundaries, between rich and poor, between body and soul, between life and whatever waited in the dark. And sometimes that boundary was no thicker than a wooden seat over a frozen chute. So when you squat half naked in the cold, surrounded by wind and shadow, and the scent of everything the castle has tried to forget, you say a prayer, not just for your health, but for your soul. Because down there, beneath the stone, is more than just waste. There is history. There is dread. There is something watching. The bells ring. The doors creak open, and the scent of something vaguely edible rolls through the hall like a fog. It's time to feast. Not every night, of course, but tonight the hearth burns high. The benches are full. The long tables are laid with trenchers of bread, stacked plates, pewter goblets, and knives dull from overuse and rarely cleaned. You sit at the high table, or perhaps a few rows down depending on your station. Your stomach growls, but somewhere deep in your memory a voice whispers, "You're going to regret this." Let's start with the food. Pottage, a stew of barley beans and whatever didn't rot this week. It's gray. It's thick. It's hot at least. Salted meat, tough, chewy, soaked in spiced wine to soften the salt. Not always successful. Sometimes the edges are suspiciously green. Fish preserved in brine. Rehydrated. Reboiled. Still smells like death. Boiled cabbage again. Pickled things, onions, beets, eggs. They crunch, but they also sting. Cheese dense, sharp, wrapped in wax that peels off in flakes. Bread yesterday's, or the day before. So hard you could use it as a weapon. Ale warm, flat, and safer than water. Wine thin, sour, and likely diluted. And if it's a true feast, swan redressed in its feathers, beak lacquered, roasted until it resembles victory. Tastes like regret. Pies filled with ground meat spiced with cloves hiding surprises, a pigeon head, a chunk of bone, a whole black peppercorn that cracks your tooth. And for dessert, almonds and honey, dried figs, sugared dates if the castle is rich, and sometimes spiced custard that looks better than it smells. You eat slowly at first, then quickly, then with the desperation of someone who doesn't know when the next good meal will come. You laugh with your neighbors. You sip wine. You listen to the lute player but don't really hear the tune. And you keep eating. Because in the moment, it feels worth it. But let's fast forward. A few hours. You've returned to your chamber. The candles are low. Your belly is full. Too full. Uncomfortably full. And something inside you is gurgling. It starts quietly. Just a twitch. Then the cramp. Then the sweat. Then the realization. You overdid it. Or worse, something was off. The pickled beets, maybe. Or the eel pie. Or the stew that smelled slightly of yeast and dread. And now you have to get up, wrestle with your layers, find a torch, stumble through the dark knees pressed together, praying to every saint you can name. Because you're going back to the garderobe. The same one you visited before dinner. The one with the frozen seat. The one with the draft that feels like fingers. The one where you swore you wouldn't return until spring. You sit. You suffer. The food comes out hotter than it went in, and you vow between gasps that you'll eat less next time. You won't. No one ever does. Because medieval food is a gamble, a roll of the dice, a bite between death and dullness. And food isn't just eaten for hunger, it's social. You eat because it's your duty, to be seen, to be present, to be performing. Lords show off with spice, saffron, cinnamon, nutmeg. The more exotic, the more expensive, the more admired. Spices don't make the food better. They just make it impressive. And sometimes they hide the taste of decay. The meats are old. The fish is older. The cooks do their best. But this is winter, and salt only does so much. So you eat carefully, and yet recklessly. Because not eating is rude, but eating is risky. And when the musicians play, when the jugglers come in, when the fool makes a lewd joke about a knight's sword and everyone laughs a bit too hard, you keep eating, because laughter dulls the taste, wine dulls the fear, and hunger always wins even when your bowels beg you not to let it. Some guests excuse themselves early. They don't say why. You know why. You see it in the way they walk, urgent, fast, hunched, regretful, and by the time the feast ends, the castle is a quiet orchestra of groaning floorboards, squeaky hinges, and rushed footsteps toward the same little wooden doors along the outer walls. The guardrobes, always waiting, always freezing, always hungry in their own way. And tomorrow you'll do it again, because feasting is the highlight of castle life. It's one of the few pleasures, even if it always leads to the same bitter, bracing midnight consequences. You've made it through the feast, sort of. Your stomach is a battlefield. You're damp with sweat, cold with dread. And something inside you feels wrong. Not I ate too much wrong, but this might be how I die wrong. And in the medieval world, that's not melodrama. It's fact. Because bowel issues kill. They come fast. They come violently. They come without warning or mercy. It begins with a pain. Low, deep, rolling like thunder across your belly. Then the heat. Then the panic. And then the guardrobe. You're there again, knees trembling, fingers clawing at your belt. You sit hard, fast, gasping. It's happening. You can't stop it. You can barely breathe. And that's when it hits you, you might not make it out. Because in this time, in this place, diarrhea isn't an inconvenience. It's a sentence. A nobleman once collapsed after 3 days of it. A bishop died in his bed, leaking from both ends. A queen gave birth and bled out while her intestines twisted themselves into knots. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. No one laughs. Because these aren't just fables. They're facts. The number one cause of death in medieval castles, not war, not murder, not even plague. It's infection, and most of it starts in the gut. Food spoils, water taints, rats crawl across storage barrels. Fish isn't properly cured. The cook has a cough, but still stirs the stew. You eat, and 3 hours later, you're praying. Not for healing, but for control. You don't get it, so you call for the physician. He arrives in the early hours, wrapped in furs, dragging a satchel filled with hope and horror. He checks your pulse. He checks your urine, holds it to the candlelight, like a sommelier with a questionable vintage. He sniffs it, frowns. He pokes your belly, listens to the gurgle, mutters about imbalanced humors. Then always he reaches for the leeches. You protest. He insists. The black bile must be drawn. You don't know what bile is. You don't care. You just want to stop shivering. The leeches attach. The blood flows. And still you run to the garderobe. Over and over. Each time weaker. Each time closer to something final. The physician prescribes herbs, wormwood, yarrow, crushed charcoal, powdered dried frog skin boiled in wine, a decoction of cinnamon and vinegar to bind the bowels. You drink it. It burns. Nothing changes. They wrap you in warm cloths. They light more candles. They whisper prayers to Saint Erasmus, patron saint of intestinal suffering. And someone prepares a wooden box, just in case, because no one wants to say it. But they've seen this before. Dysentery, cholera, rot. You can die from losing water faster than your body can scream for it. And here's the worst part. You don't die clean. You die in your own filth, bent double, clutching your stomach, on a freezing toilet, or a straw-stuffed mattress soaked through and tossed into the moat the next morning. You die as proof that kings and queens are just people, soft, pink, breakable people. Even emperors don't escape this truth. There's a story whispered behind goblets never spoken in church that one great ruler died on the toilet. They found him collapsed on the guardrobe seat, eyes wide, mouth open. He went out in the same position as a stable boy, the same way a peasant dies in the field, the same way you might die tonight. So the castle watches. They listen to the number of times you pass. They feel your forehead when you don't respond, and behind the physician's sigh and the chaplain's prayer is the one thing no one says aloud. Please don't let them die this way. Because death is one thing. But death in a toilet, that's legend, the wrong kind. And if you live, if your strength returns, if you take food again and it stays down, the castle breathes a little easier. They burn sage near your bed. They say your guardian angel fought the sickness for you. They prepare a feast to celebrate your survival. And you look down at the bowl of stewed rabbit with a single thought. Not again. Because you've been there. You've stared into that pit. You've felt the cold reach up your back as you clenched the edge of the seat and begged for mercy. You don't forget it. Ever. And now as you rest a bit hollow, but very much alive, you offer a small private prayer. Let me die anywhere. Anywhere, but not in the guardrobe. The sun never quite reaches the corners of the tower where the women live. Their chambers are warmer than the barracks, maybe, but not by much. The fire is smaller. The tapestries are older. The windows are narrower to keep out the worst of the wind, but not the drafts. And every single one of them, mother, daughter, maid, or midwife, knows the sound of someone getting up in the night. The quiet creak of a mattress. The rustle of skirts or woolen hose. The hush of slippered feet on the stone. Toilet trips are a constant. Because women bleed. Women bear children. Women attend to children. And children go often, and everywhere. There's no nursery, not like today. No designated room with a padded floor and pastel-colored furniture. There's a chamber, a low bench, a bundle of old cloths, and a wooden pot shaped like a duck. That's it. Infant care in the Middle Ages means wiping with rough linen wrapping and soiled swaddling, and hoping that the chambermaid remembered to dump the pot that morning. Spoiler, she didn't. The room stinks of stale milk smoke and what they politely call nursery business. But no one complains, because in this world complaining is dangerous, Women are taught from girlhood to endure, to clean quietly, to help others go before they go themselves. A young noble girl might be taught letters or embroidery or prayers, but she's also taught how to dispose of waste with discretion. Never touch the rag before it's rinsed. Always wrap the cloth twice if you're carrying it past a guest. Never cross your legs while walking or it'll shift the pot. These are not proverbs. These are survival rules. And then comes marriage. And with marriage, childbirth. Imagine it. You're heavy with child. Your belly aches. The chamber pot feels farther away each night. Your ankles swell. You haven't relieved yourself properly in days. Because straining might bring the baby early. Because you're scared. And when the birth comes, there is no privacy. Just a group of women, mother, midwife, washerwoman, maid, circling like birds, fanning incense to mask the scent of blood, sweat, and waste. Because childbirth in this time isn't clean. It's raw. You squat over straw. You moan. You bleed. You soil yourself because the body doesn't distinguish between labor and urgency. And when it's done, if you're lucky, you have a child and your life. But the waste stays. It pools on the rushes. It stains the linen. It smells of iron and earth and something too ancient to name. And the women clean it, without question, without pause. Because this is life. And sometimes life smells like the garderobe. The children, too, grow up with waste. A noble boy might be taught swordplay and Latin, but he also knows where the servants dump the pot. He learns to pee in the corner when no one's watching. He learned not to say anything when the youngest sibling soils the shared straw bed. A child of 5 might be sent to empty the chamber pot. A child of 7 might clean the garderobe with a rag soaked in vinegar. Why? Because they're small enough to fit in the tight spaces. Because their noses haven't learned disgust yet. But childhood doesn't last long. Not when waste brings illness. Not when parasites crawl from the fur of the family dog onto the family floor. Not when unclean water means one bad drink can end a life. Diarrhea, fevers, rashes, worms. These are normal. Most children have them before they turn 10. Some never make it past 5. And mothers, they pray. Not in chapels, not always, but in silence while cleaning, while rinsing cloths, while hanging stained linen to dry over the fire. Let this child live. Let her grow strong enough to walk to the garderobe herself. Let me not bury another before summer. Even queens live this way. Their chambers may be higher. Their pots may be silver. Their maids more finely dressed. But when labor comes, when their belly twists, when the stew goes wrong, or the baby turns too late, they scream into straw just like everyone else. They grip the wooden edges of the same seat. They sweat. They soil. They hope no one remembers them like this, because no one wants to be remembered for how they used the toilet. And yet that's where life happens. That's where pain breaks through status, where dignity bows to biology, where even royalty is reminded you are flesh. And so day after day, night after night, women carry the linen, children dump the pots. Family life spins quietly around a hub of chamber pots, cloth rags, garderobes, and prayers whispered over basins. And through it all they love, clumsily, desperately, in this world where life is fragile and filth is constant. They pass the child down from one lap to another. They mop the spills, they wipe the brow, and then before the sun rises, they go silently to the garderobe. Not just to relieve themselves, but to breathe, to be alone, to let the cold stone remind them this is real, this is survival. This is family. It's afternoon in the castle. The fire burns low in the main hall. Sunlight slants through narrow windows, catching the dust in gold. People move like clockwork stewards, checking stock servants, hauling sacks of grain, children running errands, guards pacing the walls. And somewhere in the middle of it all, you feel it again. That quiet shift, the pressure, the too familiar rumble in your belly. You try to ignore it. You're speaking with a knight about horse tack. You're reviewing the pantry's winter reserves. You're helping the steward mark supplies in chalk on a slate board that's already covered in greasy fingerprints. But there it is, the urge. And here's the problem. You can't just leave, not in this world. Because going to the toilet isn't private. It's noticed. Everything is. Every trip to the garderobe is a political act. Every moment absent is a chance for someone to whisper. She left in the middle of the tally. He's been in the corridor 3 times this hour. Maybe he's sick. And sickness. Sickness is weakness, and weakness invites opportunity. So you wait, you clench, you press your thighs together, you grit your teeth, and still it builds. You excuse yourself with as much grace as possible. A nod, a glance, a muttered, "I must check the outer stores." You walk fast, but not too fast. Pride limping behind you. You reach the garderobe only to find it occupied. You wait outside trying to look casual, but someone else sees you. They smirk. They've guessed. And now, you're a target. Because in this castle, bodily needs are ammunition. You remember last month when a visiting baron had an unfortunate episode during supper. The smell crept down the table. People gagged. He left in shame. And the next morning, someone had painted a rude picture of him on the cellar door, bent over with his trousers around his ankles and a goose honking behind him. He left the castle 2 days later. No one's heard from him since. Another memory. The kitchen boy who couldn't hold it during meat prep. A splash. A scream. He's not in the castle anymore either. In the afternoon, accidents become scandal. There's no forgiveness. Because people are tired. Tempers are shorter. The air is heavier. And the chamber pots haven't been emptied since morning. You finally get inside the garderobe. You sit. You breathe. You curse quietly under your breath. The seat is cold as always. The draft lifts your cloak. You're sweating, but your toes are numb. And as the wind whistles through the chute, you think, what if someone saw me? What if someone heard? Because gossip doesn't need facts, just smells, just timing, just the knowledge that even the nobility go. And for the lower classes, it's even worse. The scullion who tracked in chamber pot spillage on his shoes is now the subject of a song in the barracks. The maid who used the noble garderobe by mistake was beaten with a broom. The tailor's apprentice who tried to relieve himself outside too far from the castle, caught short on the outer road, was fined then whipped in front of the stable hands. Public shame is a weapon. Toilet shame is lethal. Because what could be more human, and what in this world is more dangerous than being human? Even the priests aren't spared. One was overheard expelling his burdens into the garderobe behind the chapel. Now they call him Father Trumpet. He's stopped preaching in the mornings. But it's not always verbal. Sometimes it's symbolic. Someone finds a stained rag and ties it to a rival's chair. A carved joke of a drooping buttocks shows up on the edge of a chamber pot. Someone spreads a rumor that Lady Cecily requires 3 rags and a prayer every time she uses the seat. She hasn't been seen at supper in weeks. And so people adapt. They go less often. They hold it longer. They pay servants to stand guard. They ask for charcoal to mask the sound. And if they're especially paranoid, they don't go at all in daylight. They wait for night. They suffer. Because in this castle, the real throne isn't made of gold. It's made of wood, hung over a chute. And sitting on it is a risk to your pride, to your reputation, to your safety. You finish. You wipe with a cloth that somehow was stiff and damp. You straighten yourself. You exit the guardrobe like nothing happened. You nod to the guard. You rejoin the hall. You try not to wonder who noticed, but someone always does. Because in a world without privacy, without plumbing, without mercy, every flush is a whisper, and every whisper is a weapon. You should be asleep. The fire has burned low. The chamber is dark, save for one guttering candle in the iron sconce. You've wrapped yourself in wool and fur, and the kind of sleepiness that only comes from physical exhaustion. But your stomach disagrees. Again. The first twinge is easy to ignore. You roll over, pull the blanket tighter. You try to pretend you're somewhere else, anywhere else. But the second twinge, no. It's happening. You sit up slowly. Breath fogs from your mouth in white clouds. The walls glisten with condensation. The castle is colder now than it was at sunset. And the corridor you must walk colder still. You pull on your cloak, scratchy, reeking faintly of smoke and damp fur. You find your slippers. You grab your candle stub. It flickers in protest. The door creaks open, and the hall swallows you whole. The stones beneath your feet feel wet, not with water, but with something ancient. The wind whistles through the tower's ribs. Somewhere a shutter bangs. Somewhere else a dog growls. And ahead of you, near the edge of the wall, is the guardrobe. You reach it. You hesitate. Because at night, this place is different. During the day, it's gross, cold, embarrassing. At night, it's unnatural. You open the door. It groans like something living. The room inside is small, barely the size of a closet. The stone walls are slick. The wooden seat glistens faintly in the candlelight. The smell has changed. Less rot. More earth. You step in. Your candle flickers again, almost goes out. And then you sit. The seat is freezing. The air bites. The wind from the chute below rises like a breath long and slow and whispering. And then you hear it. Not rats. Not the wind. Something else. A sound you can't explain. Movement. Far below at the bottom of the chute where waste gathers, freezes, and waits for spring. You know what's down there. But something else is down there too. You freeze in more ways than one. You wait. The sound comes again. A scrape. A wet drag. A breath, you lean forward. Big mistake. Your candle dips, the flame goes sideways and out. Now you are sitting, in complete darkness, half naked, vulnerable, unprotected, exposed. You hear another sound, closer this time. Your breath is sharp in your nose. Your heart is thudding in your chest like a hammer on a coffin lid. And you remember the stories. Of the demon in the latrine, the one that pulled a knight down through the seat in the middle of the night, leaving only his slippers behind. of the maid who went missing last seen carrying a chamber pot at dusk, of the child who screamed once, just once, before the family found nothing but a rag fluttering on the garderobe ledge. You try to stand. Your legs don't work right. You're dizzy from cold, from fear. You fumble for the door. It's further than it should be. And the sound, it's closer now. You bolt upright. You pull your hose up, not caring if it's crooked. You crash out of the garderobe into the corridor. You run. Not quickly, not gracefully. Like a hunted thing. Like something that's just been seen. You don't look back. You don't want to know. By the time you reach your chamber, you're panting. You slam the door. You bar it. You slide down to the floor and sit in the dark, shaking. You don't sleep. Not this night. Because fear is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it's cold and wet and smells like rot. And sometimes fear lives in a hole in the castle wall, waiting for the one who dares to visit after dark. Because this place is old. Older than you. Older than the stones. Older than the idea of hygiene. And beneath the castle, in the tunnels, in the pits, in the drains, something remembers. So yes, people died on toilets, but not all of them were sick. Some were taken. Some fell. Some never came back. And so even now, centuries later, the smell of an old garderobe is enough to stop your breath. Not from disgust, but from that deeper, older instinct. The one that says, don't go down there. So, you made it. You've gone where no bard dares sing. You've stepped barefoot onto freezing stone, pulled rough wool around your knees, lowered yourself onto a garderobe seat, still damp from someone else's nightmare. You've lit candles to keep the shadows away, and whispered prayers not to saints, but to plumbing that doesn't exist. You've lived the entire medieval toilet experience, the clumsy chamber pots, the shared rags, the drafty corridors and awkward exits, the sickness, the stink, the fear. And now you're back in bed, still cold, still queasy, but alive. And as you lie there staring up at a dark ceiling that leaks cold like a wound in the stone, you begin to understand something. Toilets tell the truth. About life, about status, about who cleans and who squats and who has to carry the full pot down 4 flights of stairs while someone else sips warm, spiced wine by the fire. Because no matter how rich you are, no matter how big your castle or shiny your ring, you still go. And someone still has to deal with it. In the medieval world, that meant a servant half asleep and half frozen, stumbling through darkness with a bucket of someone else's insides. It meant a mother wiping a child with linen reused too many times. It meant an old man dying not in bed, not in battle, but folded over a chute with no one there to hear him fall. And now you can be grateful. You get plumbing. You get privacy. You get soap. No one's weighing your urine. No one's burning rosemary in the toilet room to cover the stench. No one's hanging damp rags by the fire to dry before reuse. You can flush. You can close the door. You can turn on a light. You can breathe. But even with all that, as you drift off, there's something oddly human in remembering what life used to be like. Unfiltered, unequal, unclean, and in its own way unforgettable. Because the castle garderobe wasn't just a toilet. It was where you felt cold, where you felt scared, where you realized that even power couldn't protect you from your own body. And as your breath evens out now, as your limbs go still under warm covers, as your heart stops racing from that last imagined noise behind the chamber door. Let it go, let the castle fade, let the smell vanish, let the old stones crumble into dreams. You're not there now. You're here, in a bed that doesn't itch, in a room that doesn't drip, next to a bathroom that doesn't require a cloak and a candle. There's no draft, no pit, no shame, just sleep. You survived another night in the past, and now you're free of it. So close your eyes. Take one last breath. And remember, you don't have to wake up in a medieval castle toilet. Sleep well.